Okay, so if you guys want me to read articles on Substack, I'm going to do it. I'm going to read articles on Substack, but you got to send me $9. That's the cost. So I have Terrence on Substack. He's part of my secret subscribers only chat, and he sent an article in, and he said interesting article. So because I value the support, I'm going to read it. I just started this. I just got back from the gym. I'm going to sleep at like 6 p.m. I'm trying to keep to this strict schedule. It's really hard to go to bed at 6 p.m. I got to put on my sleep mask. I got to block out all the light. And then I have to go to sleep and then wake up at 4. And then I go see the sunrise and I go for a hike and I go to the gym and I cook and I eat breakfast, and we're going to read this article. So the article is called Whither, Utopia. It's by a Substack called Strange Loop Canon. That sounds like an indie band name. And we're going to make it small so that you guys can, so it fits in with my beautiful face. Here I am. Here is the article. Whither, Utopia, the mystery of why we don't dream of building perfect societies anymore. He's got a quote by Albert Einstein. This is Rohit Krishnan. Any fool can know the point is to understand. And he's got stuff about AI. He's got stuff about Medici, Peter Thiel, British East India Company, software, Gemini. Okay, so he writes something probably every 2 to 3 weeks is his, from what I'm seeing here. That's from his latest. He's got, he's got 13,000 subscribers. So this guy, he's not in the top tier. He's not in the 40,000 subscriber tier, but he's in the 13,000 subscriber tier. So he's making it. He's making a living. And I want to make sure that you guys can read along if you prefer to read along, if that's something you like to do. So I'm gonna make sure that the transformation is correct. All right, I think you guys can read this. Let's start with a story. Robin Owen was a Welsh industrialist born in Newtown. I'm supposing that's in England. Owen moved to Manchester when he was quite young. I'm going to move around, I suppose, where this thing is, so that looks like I'm staring. It looks like I'm looking at the text. That'll be good, right? He moved to Manchester when he was quite young and quickly rose to prominence as a manager in the cotton industry. He was self-educated, reading everything he could get his hands on. He was particularly impressed by the Enlightenment thinkers from Locke's theory on human development and the importance of education to Rousseau's ideas on natural human goodness and the corrupting influence of society. They resonated with Owen's belief in the perfectibility of human beings through environmental improvements. His success at New Lanark Mills in Scotland, where he implemented progressive labor practices such as fair wages, reasonable working hours, and comprehensive education for workers' children, demonstrated his commitment to improving social conditions through rational management. After he had his economic success, he wanted to put his grand theories into play and create a truly utopian society. So he created New Harmony in Indiana, aimed at demonstrating the feasibility of social reform through cooperative living and education. He brought about the smartest people he could find, artists and scientists and intellectuals, to make New Harmony incredible. It worked for a while, too, even though its story ends in decline. New Harmony faced economic difficulties, internal disagreements, and lack of enough practical skills among its members. There are at least a couple interesting things here. One is the fact that New Harmony seemed to have a strong undercurrent around things we consider highly modern, around equality and collective living and education. The second, which is arguably more interesting, is that they clearly believed in the perfectibility of man. Some combination of the Christian belief with the American belief with the Enlightenment belief combined to say, we can be so much better. They truly believed that with individual effort, they could create a better society. And what's more, they felt they could demonstrate it, and did just that by gathering up followers and heading to the middle of America to show the world. Robert Owens was by no means the only one. I don't know how to pronounce this. Etienne, I'll say Etienne. Etienne Cabet wrote a novel called Voyage en Icarus, so the voyage of Icarus. You know, we all know Icarus flies too closely to the sun. The novel was about his vision of utopian communism. Later, he led a group of followers from France to establish this utopian community. Since it was about communism, naturally, they ended up in Texas. They later ended up moving because of the harsh conditions to Nauvoo, Illinois, which, if you guys know anything about Nauvoo, Illinois, I believe that's also where the Mormons went. It's an interesting place to end up. And then later again to Iowa. After this biblical voyage, there was a bit of a leadership kerfuffle where Cabet was kicked out of his own community. And then, despite all odds, it went on to survive for another 50 years. If this all sounds rather eccentric, it was. It was considered so even in his days. John Humphrey Noyes created the Oneida community in New York in much more normal cult-like fashion. They practiced complex marriage where every man was considered married to every woman. There was only collective unity. There was even stirpiculture, a form of selective breeding to lead to better children. If this all sounds incredibly crazy and unsustainable, you'd be wrong. They actually survived too, thrived even, because they were creating high-quality silverware to continue their stirpiculturalist, communist, utopian ways, and that became quite popular. In 1826, Robert Owen, again of New Harmony infamy, embarked on another utopian experiment in Orbiston, near Glasgow, Scotland, partnering with industrialists Abram Combe and Alexander Campbell. Owen aimed to create a cooperative community similar to New Harmony. Orbiston emphasized shared ownership and collective labor with a strong focus on social and educational reforms. However, much like New Harmony, Orbiston too struggled with economic viability. The community was plagued by internal conflicts and disagreements among its leaders, which, coupled with financial difficulties, led to its dissolution by 1828. He was better at dreaming about utopia and working towards it than succeeding. So this is a graph with communal societies, timeline, and duration with peak membership. And the Shakers are at the top in terms of duration. They've lasted, I suppose, 120 years. And then you have start year, the latest being the Ruskin colony. And I believe the size of each bubble is the size of the initial number of people. So 6,000 for the Shakers, or maybe that's the end population. I'm guessing it's the start population. But the Ruskin colony, obviously quite small. Most of these, as you guys can see, cluster between 1800 and 1860, which, interestingly, I've been writing a little bit about Schopenhauer and Nietzsche. And this is the time frame when Schopenhauer and Nietzsche are writing, between early 19th century to about 1860 is really when that kind of Schopenhauer-Nietzsche axis is really, of course, Schopenhauer doesn't actually become popular until like 1905, or a little bit earlier, maybe the 1890s, but this is core Schopenhauer-Nietzsche, especially 1820, 1820. But this 1840 to 1860 time period, this is like when the Communist Manifesto comes out. I mean, this is a very revolutionary period. So it's interesting to me because a lot of people, when we talk about social revolution or decades or time periods when social revolution was possible, or a chronology of social revolution, most people think about a couple of things. They think about the Protestant Reformation, so 1500s. Maybe they think about the Anglican Church around 1524. They might think about the founding of the Jesuits. They might think about, if you want to go earlier, you think to the Nominalists, you think William of Ockham. But after that, after the Protestant Reformation, maybe you talk about the English Civil War, and eventually, you talk about communist revolutions. But most of the time, if you talk to people and you said, when did the communist revolution happen? They would say, 1917, of course, in Russia. But that was the implementation. That was a military revolution. But the actual ideological, and wow, I got to stretch my back out. All right, back is stretched. So people think about the communist revolution as 1917, but in fact, the manifesto was written in 1848. So then there's this question there that we seem to have this gap between, everyone knows about 1917, everybody knows about the 1960s, obviously, but there's this gap, I think, in understanding the progress of revolutionary movements between 1917 and the Protestant Reformation, basically. Sometimes people talk about the Industrial Revolution, which itself is suspect, right? When did the Industrial Revolution occur? Well, you could say it happened with the steam engine, or you could say it happened with the mechanical tractor. You could say it happened with the clock, or the mechanical clock, the geared clock. Those three things happened hundreds of years apart from one another. We didn't have mechanical gas-powered tractors until the 20th century. The steam engine, early prototypes, I think, came out in the 18th century, and then the clock was around in the 14th century. So the package of technology that we call the Industrial Revolution, they say, this was the year when the Industrial Revolution happened. It was a lot more slow and spread out than all of that. But in terms of ideological revolutions, again, separating that from the Industrial Revolution, not a lot of discourse is talked about between, again, Protestant Reformation or maybe the English Civil War. So we'll say 1666, 17th century English Civil War, and then communist revolutionaries, 1970. Sometimes you will get American. Okay, so we can talk about revolutionary France. That's another one. I'm doing this on the fly. I don't have notes here. I'm just kind of brainstorming with you guys. So 1776, 1790, right? There's all of this revolutionary activity in France, and then you have communism. So I'm really looking at this period from 1840 to 1860 as an incredibly revolutionary period, and that's reflected in this graph. What was it about the 19th century that we had such utopian ideals? Plato wrote about his utopian ideals in The Republic. Thomas More wrote Utopia in 1516. Voltaire wrote Candide in 1759. The first one was perhaps the Ephrata cloister, which was a monastery combined with a utopian view of life. Johann Conrad Beissel, a German pietist leader from the late 1600s, founded a utopian community called Ephrata Cloister in 1732 in Pennsylvania. Born in Eberbach, Beisel was marked by mystical experiences and visions. This reinforced his belief in the need for a strict ascetic lifestyle dedicated to spiritual purity. So, seeking religious freedom, Beisel immigrated to Pennsylvania in 1720. Soon, though, he wanted greater solitude and a more rigorous spiritual practice. He wanted to build a perfect religious society, one that also embodied utopian ideals in its vision of a self-sustaining and self-contained group with high morals, a model of Christian piety and communal living. So he founded the Ephrata Cloister with around 80 followers. They adopted a monastic lifestyle, worked in farming and papermaking and carpentry, and spent their time preparing for the anticipated heavenly experience. They created beautiful calligraphy, lovely a cappella music, and even had a printing establishment. It became famous for its self-sufficiency, producing food, clothing, and creating religious texts. What was the magic in the 1800s that many somehow internalized the belief that a few people could come together and figure out the perfect society? Enough that day, this is a strange sentence, enough that day convinced their followers to move across the known world to try and build something from scratch, an entire economic ideology, political ideology, way of life. This is the type of ambition we don't see anymore. Even the undercurrent of the possibility of the belief is clouded in questions about feasibility and desirability and minimal viable product, in skeptical questions and rational inquiry that nevertheless stubs out the little flames of spirit. Why is that? Why is it that there was a time in our history not so long ago when smart, intelligent people legitimately thought that they had the ability to recreate paradise and then moved heaven and earth to make it so? This doesn't seem to happen anymore. Our culture is not suffused by people thinking they can make humans better or that they can create a utopian society. We seem stuck in incrementalist thinking, or sometimes believing in technology to save us, to help save us, when we're not busy blaming technology for having created a world that we need saving from. Samuel Butler wrote Erewhon in 1872, and H.G. Wells wrote A Modern Utopia in 1905. And a few decades on, all manner of mentions of utopia seems to have vanished from public discourse. It's a puzzle, the intellectual climate. One answer is that the intellectual climate was unique then. The Enlightenment ideals came about recently. The ideas were spreading throughout the world. There were books and pamphlets and a cultural move towards building the kinds of utopia that the broad thinkers envisioned. John Stuart Mill wrote The Principles of Political Economy. Tocqueville wrote Democracy in America, which is a critique of democracy, so not really in keeping with that utopian spirit. And Locke and Rousseau's influence were still felt. So here's a little picture. Maybe we can zoom in on it if I open it in a new tab. So this says timeline of major works on Utopia, 1500. So let's see, starting at the bottom, I suppose, you have Thomas More's Utopia, New Atlantis by Francis Bacon. You have City of the Sun by Tommaso Campanella, Candide by Voltaire, An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, which I don't think is a utopian text at all. Again, this is a very strange assortment of literature that I think is proving that whoever put this together hasn't a Spark Notes knowledge of the texts that are listed. I mean, yeah, Principles of Communism, Friedrich Engels, Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx, Looking Backward, Edward Bellamy, News from Nowhere, William Morris, Erewhon, Samuel Butler, Modern Utopia, H.G. Wells, We, Yevgeny Zamyatin, Brave New World, Aldous Huxley. Aldous, I mean, this is, yeah, I understand that the topic is like works on Utopia, but if it's a critical work on Utopia, it's not really proper to, you know, put this as and just jam these all together, right? I mean, clearly there's a move when his Brave New World is written early, 1920s. That's critical. That is a criticism of Utopia. 1984, George Orwell, criticism of Utopia. Um, this is all very Jordan Peterson-esque stuff that, Jordan Peterson in a way is like the most anti-utopian thinker. It's like pull yourself up from your bootstraps, make your bed, don't form any collective vision of a brave new world, don't think you can improve human nature, just be a conservative, just deal with things as they are, just be a moderate. That whole spirit, I think, is throughout Brave New World as well as 1984, that concept of trying to create a new type of society is inherently evil. And I think it's something that is influenced by the Russian tradition of Dostoevsky, as well as Solzhenitsyn, this criticism that comes out of the Soviet Union of utopia. All this early 20th century literature is a backlash against utopia. All of these Handmaid's Tale, Margaret Atwood. I mean, you want to call that a utopia? This is a little bit silly. Maybe he's going to get into this, but yeah, okay. There's a ton of different modern books here that I haven't heard of. The Hunger Games, that I don't think matter. And then there's some weird ones up here that are a little bit early and for whatever reason are placed at the top. So I don't entirely understand this chart. It seems a little bit confusing, but we will keep reading on. This was an idea very much of its time that we could be better by thinking carefully and living better. I still think that idea is very strong in the self-help movement, but it's much more individualistic than it was. It used to be more collectivistic, now it's more individualistic. And probably because of that Jordan Peterson ideology of libertarianism and individualism and rejecting communism and rejecting fascism. However, was also the time Marx wrote Das Kapital in 1867 and the Communist Manifesto 2 decades before that. It was a time of heavy intellectual debate, and like all times of heavy intellectual debate and confusion, people felt out for all sorts of new ideas and tested them out. The first part of this essay was pretty good. It's sort of falling apart grammatically. Just like all those times of experimentation, it was likely to end in failure. Yeah, I mean, I don't like these sort of just trite assertions. Like, oh, anything that's an experiment will always end in failure. I don't know, like Christianity. I mean, I suppose in some evolutionary sense, yes, every new mutation is more likely to be detrimental than to be advantageous. But after all, Walden was written in 1854. Yeah, why is this a single paragraph? Why is this one sentence get its own paragraph? I don't know. I don't know what happened to the writing style. It feel like a new author took over halfway. How far are we into this? Yeah, hopefully halfway. Not to mention the fact that part of the ideas did get operationalized, I hate that word, in the form of communist regimes, which didn't work all that well. And other parts of it got operationalized, just such an ugly word, to use twice in two sentences, through bit and pieces legislation. I mean, did ChatGPT have a hand in this? I swear, this is getting very tedious to read. In terms of work towards equality of the sexes and better working conditions, Lincoln, after all, was a product of this time. What does that have to do with anything? Is the idea that ending slavery is a utopian idea? Maybe this reduced the need for such a separate movement. I think what's being said is that apparently Abraham Lincoln was a utopian, and that the success of Abraham Lincoln meant the end of utopian thinking, or the success of communism meant the end of utopian thinking. And I think that's kind of what I was indicating, maybe, is that the success of communism resulted in this sort of uh, what would you call it? Disenchantment with utopia. The economic climate was frothy with progress too, with the Industrial Revolution having just gotten underway and the output starting to increase wonderfully after millennia of stagnation. Yeah, I just can't handle this, right? When you're like, oh, 1860 was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And before that, it was thousands of years of darkness. It's just like such an oversimplification, and it's just wrong. It's just wrong. You don't get any of the Industrial Revolution without the previous millennia, right? I mean, from again, the invention of the clock in the 1300s, the adoption of gunpowder as a weapon of war in the 1400s, the water wheel, the windmill, all of these technologies, all of these inventions, the idea that everything prior to 1860 was like total stagnation. When you make claims like that, it makes you sound scientifically illiterate. This also meant, perhaps for the first time, the growing pie needed to be redistributed, and that became a rather important consideration in society. That doesn't connect whatsoever. You could make an argument, for example, that that literature or literacy led to populism. So more people were reading the Bible because of Protestantism, and then they could read pamphlets, and then they could become involved in a democratic conception of politics, like the early Congregationalists had voting in the church. So there's an argument to be made that cultural changes, changes in literacy, changes in information, changes in religion, all led to more distributive arguments for economy, that there should be an equal distribution of resources. But the idea that somehow technology, the growth of technology, just inevitably leads to a growing pie needed to, why? What necessity is there for wealth to be redistributed? That doesn't follow to me. Not an argument. Total non sequitur. Which also meant that many more people started looking closely at what we today would call the means of production and tried to figure out whether this newfangled way of life was indeed worth it. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many people involved in these movements were thinking that way. Obviously, when you use the term means of production, that's Marxist language. And Marx was totally cool with technology. He didn't want to do away with technology. He thought technology was instrumental for creating a socialist or communist utopia. But there were strains of primitivism, you could say, Rousseau. But it's very difficult to make the case that Rousseau was writing during an industrial revolution if you're to have this kind of simple-minded view that there was this one year where the Industrial Revolution happened, or this one decade. It certainly wasn't happening when Rousseau was writing. You could make an argument that, the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century resulted in the freeing of the slaves. Like, that's a common argument. But the primitivism and romanticism that comes out, I don't know, it's hard for me to connect that to the Industrial Revolution. Maybe if you're to argue that Wagner, for example, is a romanticist. You could even go to Heidegger, argue Heidegger is this anti-technological. Jacques Ellul is writing in the 1960s. So I always think of Robinson Crusoe and the myth of the noble savage as being connected with that. But saying that this is simply a result of, quote unquote, the Industrial Revolution, as if the Industrial Revolution was something that happened over the span of 15 years, it's just a gross oversimplification, and I think it's ignoring a lot of the other things going on. Cultural factors, the factor, hey, the entire world was discovered and conquered by Europeans, with the exception of Ethiopia, Thailand, parts of China, pretty much all of North and South America was conquered by Europeans. Pretty much all of Africa was conquered by Europeans. Most of Asia was conquered by Europeans. So that's sort of conquering, or, Heidegger uses that term in framing of the world. I think the fact that we had cartography, the fact that we could represent the world on a map and say, here's all the countries, we control all of this, I think that had a huge psychological impact on people and made people pine for this piracy of the ancient world, when Odysseus could find himself on an island in the middle of the ocean. And that's what Robinson Crusoe is modeled off the Odyssey. So it's this sense of the undiscovered, the Amazonian, the wild, savage nature, I think has more to do with cartography, with empire, than it has to do with specific technological inventions. That would be my counter argument. So here's a list of GDP per capita, where Eastern Europe hits, I guess, Western Europe. Eastern Europe in 1840 was Western Europe in like 1820. So that's quite a lag. Maybe we'll say Eastern Europe tends to be a century behind the West. So Eastern Europe's currently in 1920 right now. Western Europe also is far behind the United States. It's about 50 years behind the United States. So Western Europe is currently in the 1970s, if we just shoot these trends going forward. This meant that there were bigger industrialists, and the very idea of making tremendous progress through human effort started being seen as mainstream. It's the birth of agency. Oh my gosh, bro, please stop. Please stop. Oh yeah, it's like such a myopic and narrow, like, materialist technologist framework, where it's like, yeah, humans didn't have agency. Humans didn't even have consciousness until the steam engine freed our minds. How does this sentence even... The previous sentence is like, which also meant... I like how, you start a sentence with which also meant, which is not the proper way to start a sentence. I feel like I'm teaching ESL right now. Yeah, it's a little bit ridiculous. A little bit upside down. The idea that the concept of human agency and free will comes from technology rather than the other way around, rather than the idea that it was philosophers who believed in the concept of progress and agency who then created technology. It's very backwards. It's very philosophically illiterate. There's definitely something to this idea. Individuals definitely seem to have started to matter more, ? Oh no, nobody edited this. He got tired of editing halfway through. And then he just started ending statements with question marks. Okay, I'm going to power through it because the paid subscriber, Terrence Terrence sent me the link, so I'm gonna power through it. Hopefully we're halfway through. I said that last time, but hopefully we're halfway through. Not just in the scientific or philosophical sense, but in the sense that they could start doing things that would meaningfully change the world. As if no one had ever done anything that had meaningfully changed the world before. Yeah, Christianity never happened. The Roman Empire never happened. Alexander the Great never happened. Okay, technology made it obsolete. Until we had the ability to reshape the world around us through technology, the promise of reshaping the world around us had to deal with social technologies. Which means, you can't start a sentence with which means. You cannot do that, please. Sar, please do not start a sentence with which means. What are they teaching you people over there? This is not English, which means that even though the optimism of industrial revolution managed to kickstart the interest in creating utopias, the actual practical matter of bringing it about got subsumed by the technologies and scientific advancements that were being made. Yeah, this is very bungled, but there is a distinction being made here, which is important, between industrial technology and social technology. And utopias are not about industrial technology. None of these, utopias are about creating new industrial technologies. They're all about social technologies, which is far precedes the Industrial Revolution. Could we believe in this? Bro, this is some Google Translate right here. Possibly. This is Google Translate plus ChatGPT. I'm sorry, that's what it is. Someone wrote an essay in a different language and said, ChatGPT, please translate this to English. That's my only explanation for this. Possibly there is definitely some truth to this, but it cannot be the full explanation. The amount of pushback that technology itself got was not small. After all, Luddites came to power. No, they didn't. Luddites were doing BLM in the streets. They did not come to power. If Luddites came to power, we would not be using computers right now. Anton Howes has written wonderfully. How many times are we going to use the word wonderfully? This is a wonderful essay. I'm feeling wonderfully right now about the birth of the Industrial Revolution, how it was a gradual process rather than a step change. And while many of the social ills that the utopias wanted to abolish did get solved through technology, many more, like the equality of sexes or new economic theories, did not. We had to want to do better first. This is literally, I feel like there's some prompt in ChatGPT that's like, write an essay about utopias and start it off at a 12th grade level. And every 5 paragraphs decrease the grade level to kindergarten. We'll see if we get there. The frontiers are gone. Okay, this is the point that I was making, right? Cartography. A large number of the utopian communities were in the United States. The United States in the 1800s was very much still in its wild frontier days, a place where those started hard. Okay, we have dropped to the 8th grade level. A place where those started hard and sound of mind. I'm starting hard. Guys, I'm starting hard and I'm sound of mind. I'm going to build a great life. It's probably not a coincidence. It's probably not a coincidence that the golden age of Victorian explorers also happened at the same time. This is such weird thinking. In the 1800s, America was wild and free. It's probably not a coincidence that people were also exploring America at this time. Like, don't you see how this is a tautology? Saying that America in the 1800s was wild and free, as opposed to what, the 1700s, the 1600s, the 1500s? Yeah, it was wild and free in comparison to what? In comparison to the explorers who were exploring it. This is like that thing about Europeans didn't discover America, it was already there. Yeah, the wild and freeness of America only existed within the context of the explorers who were exploring it and saying, they were writing in their journals, oh, this is wild and free. So you can't have one without the other. So saying it's probably not a coincidence, no, it's a tautological statement. The sense of man taming nature, of going to the frontier and finding a new way of life, this was forefront in people's minds. You can sense it when reading their books or novels or newspapers. Dickens wrote in that time. So did Jane Austen. How is Charles Dickens about being wild and free on the frontier? Was Charles Dickens writing about cowboys and Indians and strange new worlds? This is just total non sequitur. Hey, Charles Dickens wrote during this time. So what's the argument? Why are you mentioning that? Why are you name dropping Charles Dickens? And then he's just going to name drop a whole bunch of authors. John Stuart Mill, Victor Hugo, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Melville. It's like, okay, you could make an argument. Obviously, some of these authors, Melville, for example, wrote Moby Dick. Moby Dick is about a man's struggle against nature in the wild of the ocean. So you can make an argument there. But just throwing in Charles Dickens, it's like, it makes me question. It makes me question if this was written by a human being. When the frontiers existed, we could test ourselves against it, which meant we could look at the vast expanse and see infinite potential. We only really have it today in the vast reaches of space, or maybe the oceans, but it all feels too jaded. What about the internet? What about the internet as a vast expanse with infinite potential? Maybe the internet's too gentrified by ChatGPT and ESL. But I want to go in the oceans. I like colonizing Antarctica the most. That's my favorite. Space is third on the list. The melancholy of the human condition. This reads like a Bronze Age mindset. This reads like a politically correct Bronze Age mindset when you talk about owned space and, without lands to conquer, we've succumbed to the melancholy of the human condition. This is very based. The intellectual environment and the economic climate and the political climate and the literal climate and the actual weather, none of which were particularly stable due to climate change caused by the Industrial Revolution, somehow coalesced in the 1800s and pushed a large number of idealists and religious leaders and hard-nosed realists to make their own versions of utopia a reality. We've lost this. Remember what they took from you. Remember what they took from you. We've lost this. Utopia is a laughingstock today. Utopian, a pejorative. Remember what they took from you, utopian man. Remember what they took from you. Perhaps it's just the failures of large-scale social engineering like communism. We tried it. Didn't work. We tried it. Didn't work. Or the emergence of postmodern skepticism, starting with Nietzsche in the late 19th century, which is, by the way, the height of, utopianism, but that's okay. Starting with Nietzsche in the late 19th century to Foucault and Derrida, they discussed the flaws with Enlightenment rationalism. It fundamentally questioned grand narratives and universal solutions, thinking them overly simplistic and naive, extending to the Enlightenment idea of progress. Instead of grand narratives, the focus became on micro-narratives. I don't even know what that means. How is Nietzsche involved with micro-narratives? Or, what is the... Foucault and Derrida are obsessed with micro-narratives? What does that mean? Is that talking about race and gender? Is that the micro-narrative? Skepticism of rational progress, and perhaps consequentially reliance on technology to be the answer. That's what Foucault and Nietzsche and Derrida argue, is that the answer is technology. I mean, I just don't believe that this person has read Nietzsche, Foucault, and Derrida. I haven't either, but you're just kind of throwing things together that don't make sense. I've never heard of, and Nietzsche's central point is that technology was going to save everybody, or that, Foucault and Derrida were all about technology. Maybe you could quote those authors, or at least, paraphrase them or something if you had ever read them. Otherwise, you're name dropping people in an attempt to sound really cool. Anyone who name drops Foucault and Derrida without making an argument from primary sources, or even attempting to paraphrase, or even attempting to explain the idea, I just kind of automatically dismiss that person as a pseudo-intellectual. Is that bad? Is that wrong of me to do? What I find amazing about the utopian societies though, is the sheer scale of ambition. They all had their flaws, but they had a philosophical heft that we don't see much. We sometimes make fun of the beliefs of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs pitching their fruit squeezing startups as changing the world. But here, there were literal pastors creating communities to quite literally create the literal utopian world and better the literal human condition. Yeah, if you use the word literal and literally in the same sentence, you are unironically, ironically, literally a bad writer. This is bad. This is bad. These ideas are bad. The grammar is bad. The word choice is bad. This is torture. This is really difficult. Someone should do this to me. Someone should analyze my Substack writing and tear it apart this hard, because I feel like I'm building up bad karma by making fun of this guy, and I need to be spanked. Someone needs to go through all my grammatical errors. But legitimately, that's good advice. Like, as much as this might be physically painful, if you truly care about good writing, you should take my advice and not use the word literal twice in a sentence. They collected members and created the world they thought should exist regardless of the success or failure. This is to be admired. Period. Even envied. Period. Even envied. What a dramatic sentence. What a powerful two-word sentence that is. What is the modern version of this? We do think about technological advancements that actually solve our problems. Correctly so. Another powerful two-word sentence. And demonstrably, we have gotten much better at social consent. What does that mean? What does that mean, bro? We're at a 6th grade level, I swear. This is a 6th grader with ChatGPT. Demonstrably, we have gotten much better at social considerations. What do you mean by that? Are you talking about the end of slavery? Are you talking about gender equality? Is that the argument? But it's also true that our lives are atomized. Whoa, I've never heard this take before. You're saying we're atomized? That's crazy. Many profess the feeling of living inside a hamster wheel. Yeah, reading this essay is like living inside a hamster wheel. Even if the wheel is highly comfortable. No, it's not. It's not comfortable reading this. And many more seem to talk about bringing forth the resurgence, capital R, of a non-economic degrowth agenda. What does that even mean, non-economic? A non-economic degrowth agenda. I would like to see a non-economic degrowth agenda on this Substack. I'd like to see this Substack degrowthed. That's what I would like to see. Crypto arguably tried to have utopian ideals and so far failed pretty miserably. By what standard? By what standard? I mean, I think crypto is a scam. I do, like, I'm not going to disclose, I guess, my fiduciary status or anything, but how has crypto failed? Crypto's been going on for at least a decade, and it's got billions of dollars in it. So where's the failure there? What, is it crashed to zero or something? What's the argument? I mean, I do think crypto is a scam. Like, I am fairly anti-crypto, but probably because no one has ever given me crypto before. I've had to buy all my own crypto. But its contributions, even with the earliest examples like Zuzalu, is not yet at the scale nor ambition of New Harmony. Effective altruism looked to be similar for a minute there too, but that doesn't seem to have lasted either. Says who? I mean, effective altruism, and I see all these rationalist meetups happening in San Francisco, El Salvador. I think these people are still alive. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't think you've done your homework here. We live in a time now that seems all too close to the 1800s in some ways. Whoa. As opposed to what? As opposed to the 1900s? You know, 2024 is not like the 1900s at all, but it's very similar to the 1800s in some ways. how do you get away with these gross generalizations? I'm just going to accept that this is a prank. I'm being pranked right now. This is a fake essay to prank me. The economic climate seems poised for a new epoch. Technological changes are making lives unrecognizable, certainly to our parents and also to our my parents. They walk out on the street and it's unrecognizable. They don't recognize life anymore. To our children, to our my children always say to me, they say, life is unrecognizable. I don't recognize this world anymore. The very idea of art is changing. What does that mean? New frontiers are being discovered. Isn't this the opposite of what? Oh, please stop. So before, the statement was, in the 1800s, we had utopias because there were new frontiers. Now we don't have utopias anymore because there are no more frontiers left. And I was like, okay, I hear the argument. You probably could provide some supporting details or, whatever. But fair argument. I'm willing to hear that argument. Now, just like 10 paragraphs later, new frontiers are being discovered. So which is it? Is Utopia dead, or is this one paragraph ago you were saying, okay, crypto's a total failure. Now you're saying new frontiers are being discovered. What are you talking about? Which argument are you making? You seem to contradict yourself. There is even a rising movement of people dissatisfied with the atomization of society and what they would call capitalism and searching for alternative sources of meaning. We should be able to bring back the idea that life can be better, of working together to bring forth a utopian existence. Well, I'm just prejudiced against that now because the essay is so bad. I feel like we should stomp out all utopias now. I think that's my position based off this article. The spirit of pioneering ambition is perhaps our best feature as a species. We only seem to get it in glimpses as you glance through history, seemingly glaring at us from a gargantuan gaping hole in the chasm of our reality. Seemingly at random, as if a capricious muse. I just made up. My eyes are glazing over and I'm glimpses of glances. The actual writing is even worse than I could imagine. Seemingly at random, as if a capricious muse bestows it on us outside our control. But this isn't preordained, nor is it true. If audacious optimism and a focus on utopian outcomes is achievable, then not doing so is a fault of the spirit. It is worth asking why this form of optimism is no longer around. So he does this donut thing where first he says, crypto has totally failed. Next paragraph. We're currently living in the 1800s all over again. The pioneering spirit is returning. Next paragraph. This optimism is no longer around. So it's he manages to contradict himself twice in 5 paragraphs, in 2 different directions. So there's no content here. There's no history here. There's nothing. I mean, this is very strong. This is very strong. Peter Thiel. Let's see. Peter Thiel has a lot of ideas. One of them was entrepreneurship. I love Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel, please give me. He lists a bunch of crypto CEOs. Peter Thiel, please give me money. I'm willing to pump out nonsensical, self-contradictory ChatGPT articles if you just give me some money. I believe in a utopia where I don't even want to say it. I can't even say it. Yeah, I don't want to say it. Rohit, you failed me, buddy. You failed me, Rohit. I trusted you that this was going to be a good Building God. Buy it now. What is he selling? Building God, demystifying AI for decision makers with 7 ratings. 3.7 stars. That's not good. That is not good. This is not. What are the chances that this book was written with AI? Let's see. A great overview. He's a great writer. This book is super readable, timely, important, thought-provoking. I'm still reading this book. Yikes, dude. Yikes. Why? That was really difficult, guys. So that's all for today. I want to throw something out there, which is that very quickly, back in March, I was invited to go to Europe to make a documentary. I announced that publicly to my YouTube channel. I said, hey, I'm going to Europe. If someone wants to meet up, let me know. Within 20 days, the documentarian got a different job, and that fell through. So subsequent to that, I said, well, I guess I'm not going to Europe. Then a new development came along, and basically the cost of the flight tickets was covered, but the stay was not. So I had a flight theoretically, but I didn't have anywhere to stay. So then I was talking to people, and I said, hey, do you have a place where I could stay? And there were a couple of people who said, oh yeah, you can stay with me. Now the flight ticket's under question. So the idea that I'm going to end up in Europe at this point is once again on shaky ground. And I guess I'm looking at the collection of people who had offered to see me or to meet up with me. And I am now in a skeptical place as to whether that's going to happen, because if I have to self-fund this flight to Europe, I'm looking at my 18 Substack subscribers, and I'm saying, yeah, I don't have enough money to do anything right now, let alone fly to Europe and go on a vacation and meet up with people. So if someone's interested in sponsoring my trip to Europe, flight tickets from America are like $300. So if people want to crowdsource that, I guess I'll remain committed to that. But otherwise, I'm just gonna say, I was 100% on that, because I'm willing to go anywhere, anytime. But when it's this bait and switch thing where people offer stuff to me and they say, hey, let's do this, and I'm like, 100%, let's do it. And then I'm like, okay, I'll let other people know I'm gonna be in the neighborhood, and then the rug is pulled out from under me, and it's not my fault. And I'm just thinking about how this has happened to me over the years, and it's like, fundamentally, this is what happens when you deal with unserious people, young people, I should say, immature people who get excited about projects and ideas, but there's no skin in the game. There's no investment. I was just watching the Lex Friedman podcast with Andrew Callahan of No Gas, No Breaks. And, I like Andrew Callahan. I think he's cool. I think the idea of going around America and interviewing people, I think, is cool. I think No Gas, No Breaks is cool. And I think every, 25-year-old wants to do that. Every 25-year-old wants to drive around the country and interview people. Everybody wants to go cover the news and wear a beige suit and have an afro. That's every 25-year-old's dream. But, Lex Friedman was a very bad interviewer. He just kept repeating, like, I appreciate you taking accountability or something. But the point of me bringing that up is that I've always wanted to do that, and I've expressed I've expressed in videos here, like, oh yeah, I wanted to do a road trip, so I did a road trip, or oh yeah, I wanted to build a commune, so I found somebody who had some land, and then I asked for people to come out onto the land. Um, One of those things, the road trip was successful in that it just accomplished the immediate goals of what it was. The failure of the road trip would have meant that nobody responded and I never went anywhere. But I traveled to like 40 different states and met up with multiple people in many of those states. So the road trip was a success for what it was. Obviously, on a long-term basis, you can't keep something like that going unless you have an audience of tens of thousands of people or more. Um, with regard to the physical utopian community, which is kind of what the article today we've been reading is sort of addressing in its tortured way, like that obviously has been a failure. And then this third thing, which is going to Europe and other things I've talked about, just like trying to even, okay, we're not going to do a utopian community. Can we just rent a house together? Can't do it. Can't do it. Rented a house with two people. Within 30 to 60 days, broken the lease. So that didn't work. Okay, well, let's buy a house. If we get, I'll buy the house. I'm buying the house. It's in my name. I'll buy a house and I'll rent it out to you. Doesn't work. Okay, let's go to Europe. Let's film a documentary in Europe. Doesn't work. Okay, let's just meet up and hang out in Europe. Not working. So this is probably all my fault. Like if I was extremely handsome, if I got like the Joe Biden veneers, if I got because you see, like when I smile, like half of my, which is, it's this side of my mouth, right? This side of my mouth is higher than this side, right? When I smile, like my jaw muscles are uneven. And we got these flabby little arms. I look like a 50-year-old woman. And, so obviously, if I spent some more points on charisma and attractiveness and things, then we could probably make a lot of these things work. I could probably be making documentaries and going all around. It's also an attitude thing. I mean, as much as this article was badly written, I do think there's a point about having the right spirit and being optimistic. So yeah, I'm very, in a sense, I want to be optimistic, but I also don't want to waste my optimism on things that just have nothing to do with me. Like, okay, yeah, it's cool to travel around. Sure, it's cool to go to Europe. Yeah, it's cool to make a documentary, but is that who I am? Is that my skill to the world? Like, is my skill to the world doing documentaries and doing interviews and things like that? My self-assessment of who I am and looking at this year as like, okay, whatever I want to do, I've just got to do it this year. I've got 6 more months to do, whatever it is I want to do. I personally feel that it's my writing. And maybe that's because it's more individualistic. Maybe that's because it's low budget. Maybe that's because there's no logistics. I'm looking at my Substack DMs right now, and I have DMs running with 2 different people. Eric Brooks and Brian Knuckles are subscribed to me. And Eric Brooks is like a MAGA communist or something. He calls himself a left-wing anarchist who's pro-Trump. And his Substack is ericbrooks.substack.com. And he says, the only attitudes I don't want to have any part in platforming are climate crisis denial of the reality of systemic racism, and liberal hysteria about Russian and Trump. So he's an anti-racist, pro-Trump, pro-Russian, Green Party, climate change guy. He says, otherwise, I see it as crucial that people of all ideologies join together to oppose global neoliberal imperialism. So I kind of say, yeah, I'm sort of the opposite of you. And I told him June 1st would work for me. And then he said, I'll look over my schedule, find a day that works. That's May 27th. Brian Knuckles, I told him my availability. He didn't respond. That was June 2nd. So I reach out to people. I talk to people. It doesn't work out. Brian Knuckles, let's see his Substack, right? He's got a YouTube. His YouTube channel is Brian Knuckles, Nuckols 9520. He has a website, brianknuckles.com. Didn't know that. But he last made a YouTube video 7 months ago. He last put out a short. It actually doesn't tell you when the short happened. But I guess he has a TikTok, brian.knuckles. His website is defunct. It doesn't actually have any content. But yeah, I reached out to both of these guys. Nobody wants to talk. So people don't want to... they don't want to work together. So it's just me, myself, and I. And we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm literally trying my best over here. I'm doing the best that I can do. And it's not. Here's a recent. So someone who has 10,000 followers on Substack subscribed to me, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll reach out to this person. And their response, and I said, hey, thanks for subscribing. You seem to be doing very well. I asked around. I was told you were a nice person. I should subscribe back. Looking forward to reading your stuff. Doors open if you have any private questions. Public interviews on my platform or yours are also cool. Response was, hey, I love your analysis of things. Thanks for getting in touch. Which is a polite way of saying, I don't want to do an interview with you. So that's the status of things. So the Utopia has fallen. So my ability to work with others and to get interviews and promote my stuff is... So far, we are not doing well. I had a guy he said, hey, I work for Curtis Yarvin. Send me, at the time the article I had written was paywalled. And then he was using a BAP handle. He was using, I forget what it was, some Greek word. And I said, yeah, hey, what's going on? Nothing came out of that. So we are somehow, I'm just, I can't even say I'm burning bridges because there never really was a bridge to burn in the first place. So I won't say that I'm burning bridges. I will say that I am failing to build bridges. And given my lack of ability to build bridges, and the intense frustration that this gives me, I am intensely frustrated at my inability to build bridges with other people. Whether that's due to some kind of biological, anti-human, narcissistic, sociopathic, disease of my brain, whether that's due to some childhood trauma, whether that's due to poor choices or a lack of Christian humanism and goodwill and Holy Spirit and love for all peoples. Whatever the problem is here that's causing me to build no bridges, at this point, as much as I would love to just become a different person and make something really cool happen, at the moment, it seems like I'm completely alone on the island. And maybe that's that's why I love Robinson Crusoe so much, and that's why I love Odysseus, because it's about a man who's fundamentally alone in the world. And that actually does appeal to me. So, um, yeah, I'm going to continue writing every day and writing a lot and being focused and not getting distracted. But I got this little, what do you call it? A little suggestion from the live chat or whatever we call it. I have some sort of I'll leave a reply. I'll say we'll do a review on my YouTube, and that's on the deep left analysis chat. I don't even know how to describe it further than that, but anyways, that's enough for today. I have some writing to do. What else do I want to do today? Writing. That's pretty much it. Writing and sleeping and eating, and maybe purchasing more food and cooking in the kitchen. What else could I possibly want to do on a day like this? It's a Friday, the weekend's here. What are you guys doing? What are your plans? Tell me your plans. Tell me what you're up to. I'll catch you guys later. Bye-bye.